Welcome to Mind Over Masculinity, listeners, where we delve deep into the evolution of society and the pivotal role men play in it. Now, in a world that's rapidly changing, we must ask ourselves, how have the traditional roles of men shifted, and where do they stand in today's modern landscape? Well, is society still bound by the outdated norms, or is it evolving into something new where every individual, regardless of gender, can thrive? So, today, in this episode of Mind Over Masculinity with your host Sana, we are honored to have Jessica Martin. She's a visionary leader and human strategist whose mission is to dismantle societal constraints and help businesses and individuals achieve the success they desire. After navigating her own journey through burnout, Jessica now focuses on healing, organizational culture, and the mind body spirit connection, all of which play a role in understanding the transformation we are witnessing in men and masculinity today. That's what Healthy Mind by Avik is all about, right, listeners? So, with that, Jessica, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored and excited for you to, have you with us here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I think this is a good channel and topic.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Jessica, let's begin the conversation by looking at the status quo right now, at the role of men in society today. We have seen a huge shift in the expectations placed on men, both in personal and professional life. We are seeing discussions and conversations around this encouraged right now among us, which is really a good way. It's kind of a very positive development. But what do you think is the most significant change in how society views men compared to previous generations?
I think that that's a really valid conversation and point to make because the reality is we have changed as a society. And because we have changed, it has changed how we're, I guess, approaching genders and also the preconceptions of them. So when we're looking at like the male gender versus the female gender in society, it's vastly evolved very quickly over the last decade. And one of the things that we're seeing is the societal norms transition, right? And I think of how, at least in America, there's been a lot of noise over the years for several decades about femininity and women's rights. And what we're seeing now is kind of the outcome of that. And so there's these stigmas that men have that honestly, they just aren't always that fair. And there's this noise out there, if you will, that is really ignoring them and they don't really have a voice. They don't have a place to really fit and perform in society because all of these other labels, all these other genders, all these other things are making more noise. And so, where does that leave our men, especially our young men, in these constructs of society that we have? We're told, we're consistently giving the messaging of be strong, don't be too strong. Be outspoken, don't be so loud, and it's this confusing paradigm that we've placed them in of what the role of a man is like. And the outcome of that is causing so much disruption and confusion for them, increasing mental health issues, increasing happiness, or in a when I say increasing happiness, I mean it's decreasing, but like the increasing awareness of their happiness is going down, and they're also experiencing other things like burnout, but they experience these things different. And most of the information out there is broad. It doesn't necessarily pinpoint a gender. And then when you do look at the gender ones, like for example, with burnout, burnout is not the same thing as depression and other like mental challenges that anyone would be going through. Burnout is specific to career or job and things like that. And even though their men have a rate that's lower, because women are 66% and men's chance is 42% of getting burnout, the difference is the impact it has on them, because physiologically, men and women process emotions, feelings, and threats differently. And for women, they often will have symptoms or reach out for help or, these different things that are available, whereas men won't, because they have this social stigma that they have to be this
Mm.
specific type of person, and they won't reach out for help. And then when they do, the 42% that do fall into burnout, those ones aren't always sure where to go to get help. And the consequences of it, even though it's only 42% compared to the 66, it's a lot higher consequences for them. They have bigger health issues and sometimes resulting in death. And so I think that the fact that it's overlooked is unfortunate. It should change, and they should have a voice of equality as well as other genders or labels that are out there. Because when we're looking at these younger generations, the Zs, the millennials, their rates of mental
Mhm.
health are much higher than women's. Yet there's still this stigma that they can't go get help. And statistically and historically, that men's death rates were higher as far as like heart attacks and what have you. But over the years, it's kind of balanced out and it's equal in whole. And it tells you what the stress level is and how it's getting skewed. And I think that obviously I have a lot of information about this. I'm a little passionate about men's mental health because they just don't have the ability to reach out.
I know, and I absolutely agree with you. So many of the very in a very comprehensive way you explained. I mean, this social setting, especially for men, right from their childhood, it doesn't seem to allow them to be vulnerable or emotionally available, because that may be contrary to what the entire idea of uh, or the fundamentals of masculinity be. And it's really fascinating to see how these expectations right now they are shifting, but we must also acknowledge the pressures that have evolved alongside these changes. So, Jessica, uh, talking about your work, I mean, you have worked across industries. You are helping organizations shift their cultures. How do you think the corporate world has impacted the way men express their masculinity, particularly in leadership roles?
How do you, again, going back to the physiology and like the difference of men and women, there's a couple of things to clarify in that,
Mhm.
meaning that it has to do with the way that the brain is programmed. Like you even mentioned, like how they're brought up. They're brought up to um,
Mhm.
be stoic, strong, unemotional. And the challenge of that is when they come into leadership roles, that's not always the place where these things are anymore looked positively upon. Now they're in these leadership roles
Mhm.
where they have to be very, very dynamic. It kind of goes, I'm actually writing this book right now called The Leadership Revolution. And in that book, I talk about like leadership as a whole, not segregating by gender, but of course, a lot of my research has led me into some of that. And I see it too with my clients. Oh, I lost you. It's still recording, so I'm gonna finish answering this question and see if you join back in. um, but anyway, so in the leadership roles, what we're seeing is there needs to be an overall, like, wholeness of the being, the individual, not looking at them as, oh, they're a male or they're a female, so they can lead this way or that way. It's more of understanding humanity and individuals and understanding that something that is going to impact an individual isn't necessarily based off of gender as much as life experience and exposures, right? So when we're looking at how our men are showing up in leadership, they've had to very quickly transition. And it's interesting because it's generationally different on how each generation responds to them. A male leader can come in and have that stoic, non-emotional response,
Yeah.
and you're gonna end up with some generations that reject that dialogue, while other ones lean into it and find it refreshing or, something that they're a paradigm that they're used to. Yeah, at the same time, they need to have feelings and emotions so that they show that they care for people, and that's kind of that piece I was talking about where it can become very confusing and create a whole other series of unnecessary stressors because they're trying to figure out that balance. And so when we're looking at leadership, it really boils down to their experience, the paradigm that they have, and the environment that they're in. Because each environment, like a manufacturing environment, is different than an office environment, and a tech company is different than, a retail company. And so when you're looking at these different situations, as a leader, you have to adapt to your audience, which is your employees and your customers. And so I think that they have a much harder time because it's more delicate and it's a newer paradigm. So, where's their role models? Where's the people that are going to guide them and help them figure this out and transition and navigate through it? They're having to figure it out themselves now. And there's not a lot of, like I said, there's not only their ability to reach out limited, but there's not a lot of places for them to reach out to get the
Yeah.
support. And at the same time, it's making suicide rates for men 80%. 1 in 5 men have in the US have mental health challenges. 6 million of them are experiencing depression. And so if they have these outrageous numbers that are higher, why is there not opportunities and more education and support for them as a global marketplace nowadays? It's definitely difficult for them. And it besides the social stigma of the norms that we've started, and we're navigating through and out of, it also brings you into this position of what's it look like going forward? How are they
Mm.
supposed to balance? Because look what happened to women when we started leaving the homes, going into the workplace, running businesses, doing all these things. We had an epidemic of just all sorts of challenges around mental health for women because they were trying to do it all. And now we're telling our men we got to do it all. And let's just be honest, it's not fair. Like, if for women doing it all is just as unfair as men doing it all, but yet we're asking them to do that. And when women were going through it, we started pouring in the support, and I'm just not seeing that same support for men.
I this can be really a slippery slope. Maybe many of our listeners wouldn't agree, and but I am with you, Jessica, on this. I'm with you. If that same support and empathy is there for women, um facing the challenges and coming out of them, fighting with them, then why can't be it available from the men as well? So you have seen, experienced burnout, firsthand. How does it affect men differently, and how do societal norms contribute to the perpetuation of this issue?
The societal norms have changed, yet people haven't had that paradigm shift of it changing. And when you move into a global market, gender roles are different. And the gender roles have changed across the globe for what they should and shouldn't be doing or their responsibilities and where they really fit in society.
Mm.
And it kind of goes back to what I was pointing out is they're just not as loud. And meaning versus some of the other demographics in society. And so if we're going down this path of these other demographics because we're not hearing the masculine demographic, then where does that leave them? And how does that look for them? So instead of um being in this space of what they would consider norm and what maybe men were raised with, we're seeing this shift. And we really see it in the millennial and Gen Z generations because definitely were raised very different. But if you go back in history and you look at what has happened in society as far as responsibilities, and it goes all the way back to the family dynamic. There was always for many generations the male and female roles. And sure, there was like gray areas where they might have overlapped or one might have done the other. And yet at the same time, it's evolved
Mhm.
over generations very slowly, and that's where we open it up to where everyone needs to be everything. And so men are just experiencing the tail end of this. And when I say just, it's not to minimize it. It's just saying that they've come a little further back from it than women have. And so we really should be leaning in and supporting them and also understand that as a global market and society now, we really have different paradigms that we should question. So if we're looking at a society where in their geographical area, men had specific roles, but did it in the society we came from, we need to not come with biases because that is really what boils down to a lot of this challenge is there's these biases that are negative towards men. And I think what we're going to see is in this next decade, we're going to see that flip and we're going to see some real negative biases towards women. And it all boils down to behavior, our expectations based off of our own paradigm of how we were raised, the society we came from, and what we think that construct looks like. Like in my own household, it's very flipped, meaning normally the mom in a family dynamic would be the nurturing one, the one that's tending to the children, and I was not great at that. And for a while, I thought I was a bad mom until I really realized the reality was my husband was really great at that. And so when they were going through their teenage years and having all of these feelings and these experiences that I was like, this is drama. I can't deal with this. I have other things to do. My husband was able to lean in on that. And then I've always had a career that kept me very busy and traveling. And again, let's just be honest, he's actually a way better cook than I am. And so the kids would be disappointed if I was the one home making dinner. They were like, I'm not gonna be good. Mom's making dinner. Um, but it's finding those spaces inside your work environment, inside your family, inside your social circles that are safe and don't have these biases. Because at the same time, there's so many barriers that have been removed in all these areas. Yet, there's still this silence. There's still this situation where they're not able to get help and feeling like they can get help because it's never been told that it's okay to get help. I honestly think everyone should go through therapy, honestly, because it's amazing. There's, um, I'm trying to remember the name off the top of my head, and it's something that's so common. Oh, disassociation. Disassociation is a very common paradigm for people to be in, regardless of mental health. It's just like how we evolve and adapt ourselves mentally and how that like our neuroplasticity and how it connects in our brain. And so we create these parts of ourselves. And what we're seeing is that is escalating very quickly in men because they're trying to keep the pieces of themselves together with the constructs that they know. And so when we're getting into areas where it's like, hey, you should go get therapy, there's nothing wrong with it. There is not a stigma on that. You are not going to be judged for that. That's a totally different conversation than telling people you're this, you're that. When it's like, no, you can decide to be kind. You can decide to lead. You can decide to be intelligent. You can decide to be nurturing, whatever that looks like for you.
Wow, that's such once again such up detailed and so beautifully put, Jessica. I mean, it doesn't kind of cage you to a specific role. But yes, there it's an intricate balance of both masculine and the feminine energy. And I have learned this through so many conversations that every one of us have these two kinds of energy. Sometimes we act as a protector, we have to be strong. Maybe sometimes we have to withhold our emotions, but at the same time, we have to be empathetic, nurturing. We should not have that kind of shame asking for help. That doesn't make us weak or susceptible to anything negative. So that's really, really beautifully put, Jessica. So before I wrap up this conversation, I know 30 minutes is not justified because this is such a broad and such a profound topic. As a leader yourself, what advice would you give to men today who are struggling to find their place in a world that seems to be constantly redefining what masculinity is?
Hmm. That's a good question. I do have my own opinion on this. Uh, I there is when you look at the human physiology, there are programming that comes in our DNA, and like you said, there's also masculine and feminine energy, and they both can behave very similarly. They just stem from a different place inside the individual. And so when we look at women being tenders and men being defenders, you really should look at how this is impacting you in like a leadership role and how you want to show up. Because the way you show up with these, I guess, triggers that you would have is based on your decision and choice. So I mean, when you go back to tribal times, and you tip because the physiology of men is designed to defend, they get their body responds to stress differently. It dumps different types of hormones to get different types of reactions, and the body is made for short spurts of strength, whereas a female body is made in this construct of longer stamina and being able like women, for example, can have a job standing on their feet all day long doing something like checker or assembly, things like that, much easier. And I'm not saying men or women can or cannot do these things, but I am saying that it's much easier because the physiology of the body. Whereas if you asked me to pick something up that's 100 pounds without an extreme adrenaline dump, it's going to be harder for me to do that than it is for the construct of the physiology of a man. So when we look at the physiology, then we also of the abilities and them being different of one's for stamina and one's for immediate reaction, their adrenaline pops off at different times. Then when we go and take that to the next layer, more internal to the mental processing and how we behave and react, that is also a different area where threats are perceived differently for men and women. And when threat is not the right word, but it is the word being used in science and studies, because it's always been like the amygdala part of the brain or the reptilian part of the brain of this is a threat, I need to react. And men are gonna do it protectively. Women are gonna do it protectively, but how they respond is different. So when you're in a conference room or a meeting or having a discussion at work, men actually handle the back and forth negotiations as more something that's usually more intriguing, and it's more about winning that battle, that argument. Whereas women have had to learn that and don't always see it as they see it more as a threat. So their response is going to be different. And so I'm saying this as far as the physiology and the mental piece, going back to what you're talking about. Every being has a male and female energy to it. It doesn't matter what your gender is. And at the same time, it's how we've been put into the societal constraints and constructs that show us how we're behaving about it. The behavior choice is yours. You do not have to perceive something as a threat. You can perceive it as exciting. I think negotiations are fun. And so when I get in a situation where like there's a lot of debating and there's negotiations that have to happen, I'm like, "Oh, let's do this. This is super exciting." Whereas somebody else is gonna look at that as, "Oh my gosh, this is exhausting. I don't wanna argue my side. I don't care if I win. I just want a solution." And so it depends on the individual's perception and how they balance that male female energy. And we have to have
Mm.
both energies in us because that's what makes us whole. The reality is, this society does not allow you to have both, and you can. And you were designed to have that. So when you stack all this information up together, the truth is just being authentic and true to yourself in the whole mind, body, spirit connection. I get males have a much higher success rate in my programs. It's amazing than females do because they are like, finally someone is speaking to this to me. And they're not saying you have to be this way, you have to be that way. No, I say all that, and at the same time, regardless of your gender, if you are my leader at work, I expect you to lead. I expect you to negotiate. I expect you to defend. I expect you to remove roadblocks. You are going into this position that is high stress. It takes a lot more responsibility because your increase of responsibility to others is much higher. And I have expectations of that role, not that gender. And so when you're looking at your biases, you have to really go through that cognition of how are you perceiving these individuals in this role? Because a lot of it is just pre-programmed from our DNA and it's difficult to get past.
Wow. Once again, Jessica. What that was really really such, because it's a tough one, finding balance in a constantly shifting world, but the way you explained it makes so much sense to me as well, especially that perception of the difference between role and gender. So before we wrap up, if our listeners they would like to connect with you, what would be the best way?
The best way is to reach out to me at blissoutmentor.com. And you can learn a lot there. And then if you just want to talk about what's going on and maybe what might be the next good step or path forward for you, you can schedule some time with me. And I'm happy to kind of sit, see where you're at now, and work through that situation and see what a better, brighter future looks like for you so you can be in bliss.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to add all the links in the show notes for our listeners. And Jessica, I couldn't thank you more because this was such a profound conversation with incredible insights and explanation in such a simple yet incredible way into the evolving role of men in today's society. And it's really clear that the path ahead requires both individual introspection and also collective effort. So, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
So, to all the listeners, as we continue to redefine masculinity, Let's remember that true growth is about balance. I know it can be hard, but it's one step at a time. It's progress over just trying to perfect that balance, integrating emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and strength. So, we hope that today's conversation has sparked new reflections on how you too can contribute to the evolution of societal roles, whether it's in your workplace or in your personal life. Until next time, continue questioning, evolving, and most importantly, living with purpose. This is your host, Sana, signing off from Mind Over Masculinity. Thank you.